Taylor asked this question, and it's about creating a high-quality door-to-door program in-house.
Yeah, so number 1 and 2 are I get to choose the demographic, I get to go to the customer, and then route density. Some of the cons are, difficulty, cost, retention are definitely going to be up there.
Welcome to the Bug Bucks podcast, a podcast designed to help you become a bug money millionaire. Today's episode is brought to you by Bug Bucks Plus, the #1 course designed to help you start and grow your pest control company. I'm your host, Eric Bassett, and of course, I've got your other host, Allan Draper, with me. What's up, Allan?
Hey, man. How we doing?
Doing good. It's year's almost coming to a close. It's crazy, dude. It's about to be 2024.
I know. Can't believe it.
Yeah, so wild. So, we actually have an awesome topic that we're going to be covering today. But before we dive into that, of course, just want to remind everybody listening, the best way to receive new episodes is by subscribing to our show on your preferred podcast platform like Apple, Google, Audible, or Spotify. If you love the show, please leave us a rating and a review. One last reminder, if you haven't joined our Facebook group, go to Bug Bucks, that is BUGBUX. We've got over 3,700 other pest control owners in that group waiting to connect with you and share their thoughts. It's also the best way for you to share your feedback on our show and have your questions highlighted and discussed here on the podcast. So make sure you find us on Facebook and join the group. And speaking of the Facebook group, this is actually kind of one of my favorite things that we do is finding questions from the Facebook group and then covering them on the show. It's nice to kind of give our followers and our network some love, and there's lots of good questions in here. So Taylor asked this question, and it's about creating a high-quality door-to-door program in-house. And I'm going to kind of read his post, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, Taylor. So he says, I've always hated door-to-door as a customer and now new business owner, but I see so many people rapidly growing their businesses by doing it while I burn money online advertising with bad results. I know some of these bigger companies all do it and sign up 500 plus accounts per month during the busy season. Most of them have horrible customer service and techs lose them once a contract is up. He says he's interested in having about 2 to 3 door knockers next year. He wants to know if anybody has done it and retained their image, their reputation. And then he says, I know most of this is subcontracted. So I think the real question we're kind of trying to unpack here is, how do you launch a high quality in-house door-to-door program and retain the reputation that you want and retain the customers that you put on? So let's talk pros, cons, and need to knows. Allan, where do you start with this? How do we unpack this one?
I think that I start with expressing the level of difficulty here.
Smart.
All of those things, I think it's a great question, and I'm glad that he brought it up and that we're having this conversation because it needs to be had. And there's a lot of people that are new to the door-to-door world. But for all of those things to just magically fit from one year to the next in a company is going to be dang near impossible. And by the way, this is coming from somebody, moi, who I'm a really big idea guy. I really don't like when I ask that something get done or that we try to do something and somebody comes to me and they're like, oh yeah, you can't do that. So what I'm saying is that means a lot coming from me. But there's a couple of things that make it really, really difficult. Now, I don't know if this gentleman has experience with door-to-door, but we're going to assume not. Is that right, Eric?
I don't think so. In fact, he said specifically that as a customer and as a new business owner, he kind of hated door-to-door. So he's seeing the light a little bit as an opportunity, but it doesn't seem like he's got much experience with it.
So there are several things, including that statement, that made it just kind of made me balk a little bit about why he would want to do that. I'm not going to implement anything in my business that I hate. I don't care what the results would be. So let's start there. Like, if this is inconsistent with your core values or with something that you believe in, don't do it. It's way too hard. There's other ways to market. This question's so good because it's so long and there's so many moving parts that I want to talk about. But number one, don't do something just because you see other people going out there and having success. Number one reason for that is the morality behind it. It's not worth it. If you believe, and there's some people out there, I certainly don't. I don't believe there's anything morally wrong. I had somebody come by my door just yesterday from Vivint. He's selling home automation, cameras, security, stuff like that. I had a great conversation with him. I was leaving to, go to my son's concert. He was a really sharp kid, great conversation, loved talking to him. I told him I had to leave, asked him if he wanted a water or Gatorade, which he preferred. He's like, hey, throw me a Gatorade. I grabbed him a Gatorade. That's how I feel about door knockers. I freaking love them. Come knock my door. If I'm too busy or my dog's barking or my kids are, I'm not going to answer it. I have zero problem with it. And part of that's because I've seen how many lives door-to-door has blessed. So number one, there's the morality aspect. If you truly hate, that's such a strong word that I rarely use. Do not do it. Doesn't matter how much money you're going to make. The second aspect of that statement is if you truly dislike it that much, you're never going to be successful because it's going to be really tough for you to try to recruit people, train people, and do everything that it takes to do to make it work when you have those feelings about it.
Yep.
I think it's a bad fit if you feel that strongly about it because it's not easy. So if you kind of don't like, I kind of don't like TV commercials just because I'm watching football, there's a timeout and I'm really interested what's going to happen on 3rd and 6, but there's a TV commercial, a TV timeout. And then I'm like, oh man, Pizza Hut commercial, whatever. That's different. Like, I don't love commercials, but I'm not going to go like, so for that, it's like, I could still advertise on TV, but if you have those feelings, like, stop, I'm going to stop you right there. It's way too hard.
Yeah, I'm glad that you bring up the difficulty of the whole aspect for door-to-door. So, and Allan built his company with door-to-door. We built our company with door-to-door. I started in the door-to-door industry. And I can tell you guys right away that, my first experience with pest control, the end of that first season knocking doors, I was like, goodbye pest control, goodbye door knocking, never again, right? Never, ever will I ever do that.
You and everybody else.
Exactly. And like, it's the same thing that everybody says, and then the next season rolls around and you're like, I would really love to make some money. And now I have these skills and I don't know what else to do with them. And so I want you guys to understand that the number of times which the discomfort of the situation will want you to quit, right? The number of times that little voice in your head's going to go, man, maybe this doesn't work. Maybe you're not cut out for this. Maybe this is bad for your reputation. Maybe this isn't good for your staff. Maybe et cetera, right? That little voice will chirp in your ear almost every other day. And if you are not 100% dedicated to sticking it out, not only will you not be successful, but you're never even going to get to the point where you scratch the surface on what it can do for you, right? So there's this learning period. It's a steep curve to door-to-door. Whether you're teaching it, whether you're trying to implement a door team, that's a whole other thing altogether. But if you're going to do door-to-door, it's probably a good idea for you to have experience in door-to-door yourself. That way, when you're talking about it and you're trying to develop 100%. A team, they respect you and your perspective. And like Allan's saying, if you feel weird about it morally, or you don't like the vibe that it gives off, it's not you, it's not your thing. You won't last a week. You'll go out and you're what we call offer, right? You're going to zero for the first 2-3 days, probably. And then by day 4, you're going to be like, I knew this sucked. This is a horrible idea. You're going to hang up your boots, and that's going to be it. So make sure that this aligns, like Allan's saying, with how you want to be viewed, how you feel, and just know it's one of the most difficult ways that you will grow your pest control company is through door-to-door. And I want to put it this way. If you guys are listening and you've had a bad experience yourself with a door-to-door salesman, This is the equivalent of if you were to go to a car dealership and you buy a used car from some guy and that guy ends up being a total crook. He's a jerk,
Yeah.
lemon law, et cetera, right? Not all dealerships have crooks. Not all dealerships have some guy that's just trying to make a buck and is not going to tell you all the details. It's the same way with door-to-door companies, right?
Yep.
Same way with door-to-door experiences. Some of the most valuable and fulfilling experiences I've had with customers have been through door-to-door, right? Nothing beats knocking on that guy's door where he's like, thanks, man, but no thanks. And you're like, hey, well, tell me about what you're going to do. How are you going to handle your pest situation this year? He says, I'm just going to do it myself. You talk about it for a bit. You overcome some objections. And by the end of the conversation, not only do you have a sale, you've made a friend, right? And you have somebody who's willing to support your local business. And you start developing this reputation that really benefits you and kind of fulfills this desire to be not only a business owner, but be a resource for your community, right? That's the upside. But if that's not your jam, then that's going to be a difficult thing. And then kind of my next thing on the list here, and I'll let Allan talk about this too, because I'm sure he's going to. Door-to-door is very expensive. As far as customer acquisition cost goes, I talk to a lot of people about cost per lead, right? And on the really cheap side of it, you've got maybe some Facebook ads and some other stuff, referrals, which are basically free, kind of. And then on the very, very other side of it, you've got like customer acquisitions, like you're buying a company and you're paying dollar per dollar or more, for those accounts. And then like right below that, you've got door-to-door probably, where you're paying overall, if you're going to run a program, 50, 60, 70%, depending on how you run the program, right? And we'll dive more into those specifics later. But you just need to realize that, maybe you're not having a lot of success with digital marketing, and maybe you're paying a lot for those leads and it's not great. But I promise you're still probably paying less than what you're going to pay for door-to-door. So high cost is something that you really have to consider.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that, there's no risk to the high cost because if they don't close a deal, then they, don't get paid. But you're going to have a lot of upfront costs, getting your team in place, getting trained, getting all of those things in line. And then you're also going to have operational costs. So you're going to want to have trucks ready to go, service the accounts. You're going to want to have technicians, whatever. Now, we're talking about kind of a smaller team with 2 to 3 door knockers. So that those costs, the operational costs up front might be a little less, but you're still going to have some. You're still going to want to get everything set up so that you're ready to service those accounts. Because one thing you can't do is service them according to your own timeline because they will cancel. So you need to service those door-to-door accounts as soon as possible after they close. And it's very desirable to close them, to service them right at the time, or at least same day or next day. But regarding the cost, yes, you're going to look at, he expressed how he's burning money in digital marketing. I would like some more information on that because it's going to cost you about double for a door-to-door account, give or take. That's what we're paying.
Yep.
Now, there are obviously some pros with door-to-door. You're like, hey, I need customers in this geo or this specific neighborhood. So you can pick your demographic a little more. You can get pretty niche with digital marketing, but not like, hey, I want that exact house. I'm going to go talk to them like you can with door-to-door. But yes, it is very expensive. The 2 to 3 door knockers, that's a really hard target. Because you're not going to get that from a marketing company. They won't do it. The only real way to do it, besides recruiting a couple of your own reps, is to find somebody that has managed a team that has a buddy or two. That's the only way to do it. You're not going to go hire a marketing company that will do that few accounts. They're just too high in demand. And by the way, even if you do, find a marketing company they're probably going to be north of 90% of the first year contract value, depending on some other terms, how much is paid up front, what the stipulations are to be considered a payable account, things like that. I wanted to take a real quick step, if it's okay with you, Eric, and talk a little bit about the transition from somebody who hasn't knocked doors into having a door-to-door team, assuming that, we're making some assumptions here in this specific case. Like he's going to come around to the idea of door-to-door, feel like there's nothing morally wrong with it, that he's, fully bought in. In order for this individual to recruit, to retain, to train, to manage a team is going to be very, very difficult and very, very time consuming. However, I do have one buddy in particular that over the years just started knocking doors. He didn't really come from the door-to-door culture, never worked for a door-to-door company or a team. He owns a pest control company, a fairly successful one in the Midwest. And he just started knocking doors, and he's really good at it. He's got that knack, though. He's has no problem going up and talking to people. Very talkative, great communicator, very motivated, very purpose driven. All those things. And so he was able to do it. But Eric said something earlier that I 100% agree with, and that is you got to go do it yourself. You have to do it so that you understand what it's like. But I am probably, Eric, at the end of the day, I'm probably going to try to talk this individual out of it. If they're looking for 2 to 3 reps, now I don't know what that means to him. Maybe he thinks that means 3,000 accounts. Maybe he doesn't understand that that's not what it's going to produce. Or maybe he thinks that means 30 accounts. The way that I look at it is a decently run program. I look at it as 100 accounts per rep for this summer. For the we knock for about 4 months, give or take. And now I'll have some reps that are selling 400-500 plus accounts, and then I'll have some reps that don't last a week, some that sell 25 the entire summer, some that maybe are in that 100 range. So that's how I look at it. Now, the larger the team, the more that average is going to hold true. With 2 to 3 people, I have 3 guys that could all sell 500 each. Are those the guys we're talking about? Probably not, because they're probably going to go somewhere else. But those 2 to 3 people, just for sake of argument, my guess is they're going to, let's call it 300 accounts, depending on how many he gets. That is not worth a door-to-door program, in my opinion. You can get those accounts with other forms of marketing.
Yep. Yeah. And Taylor, if you're listening, and obviously I think I mentioned this before, Taylor Churchill is the gentleman that posted the question.
Taylor,
if you're listening, you're probably thinking, okay, you guys are totally convincing me to not do this. And I want you to know, we just want to make sure that you have all the pros and the cons. And we're going to give you some advice here on if you decide to do it. We'll tell you how to make it happen, how we would probably try to make it happen if we were in your kind of shoes. And to kind of mirror what Allan is saying right here, you just have to realize that there is a very high involvement and a high resource ask that you're going to run into when it comes to doing this. And I've talked to lots of other door-to-door guys, because here's the usual typical pathway when it comes to the door-to-door built pest control companies. You have a guy that is in door-to-door working for some other company, right? Gets a big back-end check. He's got an extra $50,000, $100,000 to spend, and he's thinking, man, I should start my own company, right? Goes out, starts his own company. And then he's thinking, yeah, it's fine. I'll hire these guys, I'll run the company, and then I'll go out and I'll sell my own accounts at the same time. And whenever I hear that, I kind of laugh, because I'm like, my guy, I don't think you realize that running a door-to-door team and running a pest control company, you are not going to have the time to sell your own accounts, right? And that's usually the struggle that door-to-door guys come up with. And the same thing is in reverse, right? So for Taylor, if you're currently running a pest control company and you've got kind of this day-to-day operation, you just have to realize that running a door-to-door team in itself is its own full-time job, right? And we can do a whole episode on just recruiting in general, because that's a whole unique thing. I mean, that's basically its entire own industry. is recruiting, right? And we won't dive too far into the weeds on that one, but you just need to realize that there's a lot of involvement, a lot of resources. Like Allan mentioned, you got to have the trucks ready, you got to have the techs ready. And if you're going to put on a significant number of accounts, you have to have this weird, flexible staff where you add more CSRs temporarily, you add more technicians temporarily. And then when those salesmen leave, you don't necessarily need those resources anymore. And so there's this weird expansion and contraction kind of scenario that you run into. And the bigger the company is, the less of a problem that is, right? The smaller the company is, the more you're going to run into staffing issues. And that's the same across the board with almost everything. But the other thing I wanted to mention, since we were kind of talking a little bit about cost, keep these things in mind. If you want to grow quickly and you want to have a high volume, it's going to cost you a lot of money. Okay, keep that in mind. If you want to save money, you will have to sacrifice volume or speed. Okay, one of those two. If you don't necessarily care about volume, you might be able to get a decent amount of accounts at a low cost, right? There's this kind of this little triangle that has to balance in order for you to do it. So, when you're looking at some of these other big companies and they're doing lots of accounts very quickly, they are spending crazy amounts of money doing it, right? Crazy amounts of money. So most of these companies, there's that balance, right? Where you're thinking, okay, what's it worth for me to grow by X amount % within this year? And does the cost of door to door line up, right? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So that's kind of one thing I wanted to touch on a little bit. And then, Ken, as we go through some of these details, one thing you're going to need to be really familiar with is pay scales, right? So the way that you pay these reps affects how expensive they are and what it's going to look like on your books. And there are kind of traditionally two types of pay plans. The most common one is what you're going to call the retroactive pay scale, right? And it just means that for the business, I'm going to pay that sales guy a certain percent. Let's say you start at 25%, right? And it's from, whatever, 0 to 50 or 0 to 100 sales. And then once he hits sale number 101, I bump his commission, and the commission percentage is retroactively effective to all the accounts he sells, right? And so it's advantageous for that sales guy to sell a high volume of accounts, because the higher volume of accounts he sells, the higher his commission percentage, and that grows, right? But what's interesting with that is that it kind of provides this inverse value relationship to the business, because your highest performing sales guys will become your most expensive reps, right? And the more that they sell, just like I was saying before, high volume, high speed, high cost, right? The more they sell, the more expensive that's going to be. You can do flat rate commission if you wanted to pay sales guys that way. That has its pros and cons. But other than the retroactive pay scale, there's the pay-go model, which at Natura we actually started using a couple of years ago, where you pay a sales guy his commission percentage as the customer makes payments throughout the whole year. Pros and cons there. You have to typically pay a higher commission percent in order to incentivize a guy to only get paid so much over the year. And then that retroactive pay scale usually has you paying a small amount upfront for each service account, and then a big chunk as a back-end check, right? And so when you have these smaller companies, what you end up doing is you bring these sales guys in, and let's say that they're actually selling pretty well, right? Best case scenario, you're thinking, man, these guys are really cooking. They're selling like they're doing awesome. But you have to consider that based on the pay plan that you have squared away, you might find yourself in a situation come December where you have to pay back-end checks, and you realize, I have not collected enough revenue on these accounts that I can pay these guys based on the percentages that I had to offer them in order for them to even start working from day one. So there are some financial projections that you have to be able to do before you dive into this to know whether or not logistically you can even afford it, right? So that's just one thing I was going to mention. I'll let Allan kind of take a swing at a few of the things that I said, but I promise, Taylor, we'll give you some pros here in just a second.
Yeah, I think that's right. And there's a scenario where that I could envision where you run into somebody that maybe a younger kid looking for a job. They have a knack for it. They don't really need direct training. They're very motivated. They don't have an issue with rejection or feeling like they're bothering somebody, and it works out, and they get a couple of buddies to come along. That scenario is going to be rare. So if you're set on doing this, and you can't find somebody that has experience doing it to come in and you pay them a marketing fee or whatever, and they do it. If you're wanting to be the recruiter, then you probably need to get some help. Now, Eric, we have a course on BugBucks Plus about door-to-door sales, right? Which is a great place to start. It's a great place to start. But you do have to understand that there are different activities in door-to-door. It's not just talking to a customer, signing them up. Recruiting is very, very difficult. So just that alone, retaining the people that you do recruit is very, very difficult. And it becomes even more difficult for rookies or people that don't have experience with it once they start actually knocking. Now, here are some pros. Obviously, we've spent this entire time, and it probably sounds like we're just trying to talk everybody out of having a door-to-door team. And that's not the case. I think that, and people that are familiar with door-to-door programs, they're going to agree with most of what we've said. But in terms of a younger, smaller company that wants a specific demographic of customer, there's no better way to get saturation in a particular city or neighborhood. There's just there's no way to do it. You're literally talking to everybody in there. So we love it for that reason. We love it for route density.
Yes.
So if we have, there's some gaps in our, between customers, we'll send a door-to-door team in there, try to fill in that gap a little bit. Helps a lot with operational costs. And so for me, those are the two big pros. We get to choose our customer, which has a relation to retention. But then there's, on the flip side of that is door-to-door accounts are more likely to cancel. They just are. There's this thing. I remember taking this call once and somebody's like, yeah, I need to cancel. I didn't even call you guys. You guys came out to me. And I was thinking, but you still gave us your card and signed. So what difference does it make? But it makes a difference. People think about it like, hey, I wasn't necessarily seeing the need. And so your retention is going to be lower. That being said, you get to choose your demographic, which can help balance that out somewhat. But yeah, so number 1 and 2 are, I get to choose the demographic, I get to go to the customer, and then route density. Some of the cons are, difficulty, cost, retention are definitely going to be up there. Sorry, a third one that really needs to be mentioned is the volume and the speed that Eric was talking about before. Now, along with along with his description of that, cost is going to be much higher. But honestly, like, I look back at Proof, and maybe we would have figured it out if we didn't have door-to-door. I don't want to know the answer to that question because we've had branches that didn't have door-to-door programs and they just struggle for years. Some of them we still haven't, been able to climb out. So I believe in it. I've seen it work time and time again. It's been great. So I commend Taylor for kind of inquiring about it and figuring out how to go after it. But like anything else in life, it's not easy. Anything else that matters, it's not easy. It's going to require some work. Just wanted to make sure you went into it with your eyes open.
Yep. Yeah. And, Taylor, if I was going to give you some advice, if I can put myself in your shoes real quick, if it was me, we'll imagine I've got a small operating company. And as an owner, I've kind of delegated some of the important, urgent stuff. So I've got some free time, right? And I want to invest that into knocking doors. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Like Allan said, I'm going to go out and get my own experience doing this. I'm going to probably start as close to the office as I can, where people have seen my trucks and vans already. They recognize my brand. Knock on the door, right? Someone answers, hey, my name's Eric. I actually own a local pest control company over here in the Orchards area, and I wanted to stop by and introduce myself. What are you guys doing for your pest control this year? right? Real low pressure, really super simple. And then it's going to be a steep learning curve. I'll figure it out, right? I'm determined, disciplined. And then I'm going to put on however many sales I put on that year, right? And what's cool is that they kind of trickle in, and I can kind of scale that way. You know, if my operation's struggling to kind of keep up with it, I can back off, right? I have complete control over the expansion contraction, right? And then once I feel like I've got some momentum and I'm doing pretty well, maybe it's the same season, end of season, maybe it's the next one, I'm probably going to find some local guys, right? Which means that I don't have to pay for their apartments, don't have to pay to have them drive here, fly here, anything like that. No big signing bonuses. I find some young guys that need the opportunity, and then I offer them a decent pay scale, right? And make sure that I understand the details so that I can communicate that. I teach them, train them on the door, show them how I've been successful, help them with their first few accounts, and get them going, right? And if it's 2 or 3 guys, you can pull that off, okay? You just have to know it's going to be high involvement, right? Some high resource, but it should be scalable. And you also should know that you will lose probably at least 25 to 50% of those guys that you bring on, right? They will go out, they will knock. Maybe they're successful, maybe they're not, and they'll drop off. Okay, that's a normal thing. It's a tough job, right? So I'm going to prepare for that. I'm going to know that some of these guys are going to ditch out. And you also have to know that when you have 2 to 3 guys on that team and one person leaves, that has a tangible impact on the morality of the team, right?
Oh, yeah.
If you have a team of 10 guys and one guy leaves, it's like, well, that guy sucks. The rest of you guys, nine guys are all stars. We're good. One guy leaves and you have a team of 2. Oh, you really got to worry about that last guy there, right? By himself on his own. He's got no buddies in the field with him.
He's probably gone. He's probably
rough, right?
gone.
So keep that in mind, right? So there's kind of this minimum barrier of entry when it comes to building a door team, right? You have to be prepared. Okay, maybe I bring on 3 guys this year. Next year, I'm going to try to have at least 5 to 7. You kind of scale up and scale up. And it is also something that you, like if it was me, I have to be prepared to be dedicated to that for a while. Because as soon as I take my foot off the gas, that team will dwindle. If I take my foot off the gas for just one season, that team's gone, right? By one more year. So if it's me, I'm going to kind of try to keep investing in that until I feel like my business doesn't necessarily need it anymore. And then I can take the foot off the gas, and that's fine. And then one big thing that I know that he mentioned is reputation, right? If you're trying to protect your reputation in the community, you need to make sure that you teach your sales guys how to handle those types of situations and make sure that they don't say something stupid, right? Because these are young guys. They're 20, 21 years old. And when somebody opens the door and they say, "Oh, you idiot, what are you doing here, man? Go get a real job. Like, get off my porch. What the heck are you doing here? Didn't you see my no soliciting sign, et cetera, et cetera?" These 21-year-old kids probably have a very fragile ego, right? And so immediately their immediate response is aggression and defensiveness. And they're going to say something like, "Well, whatever you, dude," and insert swear word here and some inappropriate comment. And then your office is going to get a phone call, if you're lucky, where this guy says, "Dude, who the heck are you doing business with? Why do you have these kids messing around in here?" And then you get obviously the Google review problem, Yelp review problem. And just so you know, we've used door-to-door for many, many years, thousands of counts through door-to-door. And we have 2,000 reviews on Google, more than 2,000 reviews. We have a 4.9 rating. But I will also tell you that at least 95% of the 1-star reviews that I've ever gotten have been from stupid door-to-door guys, right? That just can't help but say the wrong thing. And so if you want to have your reputation stay intact, you have to put a big emphasis on teaching that and implementing it into your door-to-door program. So Taylor, those are my tips. I think you can pull it off. It's going to be a lot, man. It is going to be a lot. So be prepared for that.
It's a lot. As we're wrapping up, business owners, one of the biggest things that we're challenged with is on our shoulders is spending our time adding the most value possible to our companies. So you have to figure out what that is. So Eric, great conversation. I think this was a great primer for somebody to get just a general grasp on what it would be like to recruit a couple door-to-door sales reps, a smaller team. And we talked a lot about the logistics and the issues that will come up and the things that somebody needs to think about. So, great discussion. You brought up some really good points. If you guys have more questions about a door-to-door team, what it would take, make sure you go to our Facebook group, BugBucks, BUGBUX. It's growing like crazy. We add north of 100 PCOs every single month, and that pace is picking up. Great community there. And also check out BugBucks, bugbucksplus.com. That's our course. There's lots of stuff in there, ranging from customer service to door-to-door sales. So check that out, and we'll catch you next time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please show your support by subscribing and leaving us a 5-star rating. Thank you, and we'll catch you on next week's episode.